This is my home, where nothing else compares to thee, a pictured hill of green and blackbird nests to see, that sodden brush and moss-clad stump a root through clear and native air and chalkline on my boot. A tree line thus of peaceful colour, tree armour-clad in bark, fancy flitting creatures and on the breeze tweet, hark, into the valley where quiet cottage here is made of stone, and the inn where clanking clinks a comrade's tone. O chiefly Lord, under your eye outstretched the crunching path, we huddle, with cup in hand, around the iron hearth. Long man, fine fellow, all in white, holding high, and laying still in silence, bronzes, looking up towards the sky. Beneath the branches of fruit and strawberry, at my feet, each mounter sit upon a regal seat. That distant smell of oak or such that burns farmers' toil, all in good cheer, these folk, 'tis ours, our pleasant soil. Bramber Castle, built in 1070, is a Norman moat and bailey castle, formerly part of the large feudal barony of Bramber, long held by the Browse family. It is located in the village of Bramber in West Sussex, overlooking the River Adur and the beautiful, lush Sussex landscape. Finally made it. So, just for a little bit of context, when we think about the Normans, we always think, oh, well, they were French. Well, that's sort of true, but sort of not. They were actually part of the Duchy of Normandy, and they were basically made up of Western Franks, Norse Vikings, and even Gallo-Romans. So actually, on a cultural level, they were very similar to the Anglo-Saxons. And one of the many theories as to the conquest of England by the Normans, by William, who would be later named William the Conqueror, one of the theories is that the reason he came here was because he felt that the throne was rightfully his. And when the throne was handed to Harold II, of course, he was naturally ticked off. And because of his familial links with figures like Edward the Confessor, he felt, well, I've been cheated out of my birthright. And that's why he came here to conquer England. Now, part of that conquest and cementing the conquest are castles. So let's go and have a look at Bramber Castle now, or at least what's left of it. So if you look at what we've got here, what's actually fallen down the side of the hill, this piece, this structure here, and the structure up here, and just off to the right, that's part of what was the ancient gateway to the castle. And if you follow me up here, and so when you look up at the structure here, well, what's left of it, you can see the window, which is actually very typical in terms of the Norman style. And you can see these recesses, these little holes. Those would have been where the joists were for the floors above. So you can see how big the structure actually was and the multiple levels it would have had, which would have been inhabited. And as we know, this being part of where the gate basically was, the entrance to the castle, this would have been, you know, where people would have been looking out, watching out over the landscape, seeing who's coming, seeing who's going. It would have been, the whole structure here would have been seen for miles as well, and would have definitely cemented Norman dominion or Norman authority in this region. This is really the magic of history. When you get to actually come and actually touch history like this is when you actually start to interact with it. And what you can see here is flint. And flint is a natural resource from Sussex anyway. But what's important about that is that wherever you go in the world, when you see a castle, it's not always made, and well, often it's made from locally sourced materials. It's not made from materials that are from abroad. Yep, we see that during the Roman period, but mostly across time, you make things with locally sourced materials. One, you keep your costs down, but two, it's also a way of making a huge social and political statement. What the Normans are saying when they use flint is they're saying, we own this land now and we're going to use it as a symbol of our dominance here. And that's what castles are. They're a symbol of dominance and a symbol of power, both politically and militarily. So when we can reach out and touch this flint, the hands, the ancient hands that put these in place were part of a new emerging system here in England. You have to remember the Battle of Hastings is what, 1066? Yes, there you go. You don't want to forget what that one, 1066. They started construction here in 1070. So this is not long after the conquest. So what's really interesting, I always find, is that sites like this never stop being used. They're always being used. And whether it's when they were initially constructed by the Normans or leading all the way through until the 1930s and 1940s when they actually built pillboxes up here just in case there was going to be an invasion. You've got to remember that when you build on a hill, and I've talked about this a million times before, hills are really important. You know, they're points for us where we can actually see the landscape around us, whether that's recreationally or for military purposes. So there's utility in everything that we do as human beings. Even people today, they're coming up here, maybe they've gone for a nice walk somewhere, but it's now an area of beauty. So we get to see the changes in the landscape. And that's what we do as human beings, isn't it? We move through the landscape, interacting with it in different ways, depending on the times. So, see, look, even here, this is actually carved stone, obviously part of the doorway that would have led into this particular part of the castle. And it just goes to show the architectural feats that had to be accomplished in order to build this place. You know, this was cut by hand. Somebody cut this, you know, roughly about 900 years ago. It's amazing. That's a prime example of what I was trying to talk about earlier, that view. So you can begin to see why it's so important. Look at that view. You can see straight across this entire area and all the way along the downs. If there was an invading army, you would see them for miles off. For miles off. And you have to remember that this landscape could also have been a lot more open. So you would have seen all sorts of comings and goings, the local people, and like I said, you could have even seen an invading army. And then, not forgetting, the people who lived in this area would have seen this castle up on the hill. I don't mean to over-egg the pudding, but again, you can see how this would have just been a castle. It was a symbol of dominance. Unlike many of the other castles that we have in England, this isn't actually a particularly good example of a Norman castle because there's so little of it left. But we are extremely lucky to have the church, which is still here today, which is just over the other side there, which was actually built for the de Braose family and the people who lived here. And that's the Church of St. Nicholas. So we're going to go and have a little look at that now. And that was built roughly around the same time as the castle here. I love ancient churches. They really do offer us peace in a crazy world. And I love the silence that you find in them. And especially on a hot day like today, it's lovely and cool. Even though we're in a Church of England church, something that I always like to point out is that even when we have Byzantine-style icons, here it's in Greek, it says, O Agios Nikolas, the holy or Saint Nicholas. And it's lovely to see these ancient-style icons in these churches. I always find that icons, they feel like little windows into heaven, and that's basically what they're supposed to be. And you can see St. Nicholas here, he's making this symbol like this. This means Christ. He's spelling out the letters of Christ with his hand. It's lovely to see these. During the English Civil War of 1642 to 1646, Bramber was held by a parliamentary garrison under Captain James Temple, a Puritan soldier who was later convicted of the regicide of King Charles I. Although this isn't the original bridge, this is actually the site of the Battle of Bramber Bridge, which took place in 1643. And the battle was basically an attempt by royalist troops from this side of the bridge to get into Bramber. There was about 600 royalist troops, but when they got here, they were met by 2,000 parliamentary troops. The parliamentary troops lost, I think, 1 soldier and 1 was captured, and the royalists lost about 8 or 9. I think by today's standards, we think of medieval battles, don't we? As if these huge armies and all this, arrows flying through the air and the clashing of swords. But no, very small little location here. But it was the last battle in this area to do with the English Civil War. Of course, that's the end of our journey today. And you can't come to a Sussex village and not finish up with a pint of local bitter. So consider subscribing, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Even in small villages like Bramber, one can see how rich and diverse local history can be, and on a large scale, how it can contribute to our wider understanding of how England has developed socially and politically over the centuries. Please like and subscribe, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.